Hey, welcome back to the channel, and what I have in front of me is Google's latest flagship, the Pixel 7 Pro, and Apple's latest flagship, the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Now, I've been using both of these phones as my daily, and both of these phones actually have SIM cards in it, and I think it's time to let you guys know what I think what does better and what you should maybe pick up. Now, I did want to start this video off by saying that if you love Android and absolutely can't stand iOS or Apple, then I mean, you don't really need much of convincing to pick up the Pixel 7 Pro, and the same goes for the Apple users who refuse to use an Android phone. But if you are open to, switching and don't really have a preference, then keep watching. So let's kick things off with its specs. Now, both of these phones are using their own in-house processors, with the 14 Pro Max using the A16 Bionic processor and the Pixel 7 Pro using the Tensor G2 processor. And in terms of raw performance, nothing can really beat what Apple's doing with their A-series chips. It's just really powerful and it's just really fast. Now, the Tensor G2 chip from Google, on the other hand, isn't the fastest SoC out there, but it's still quite fast and efficient, but it does have those AI and machine learning chops that Google's known for. The Pixel 7 Pro also has 12 gigs of RAM and up to 512 gigs of storage, while the 14 Pro Max features 6 gigs of RAM and up to 1 terabyte of storage. Now, RAM management is a lot different for both iOS and Android, so even though on paper iPhone only has, 6 gigs of RAM, it doesn't really need more than that, although it would be nice to have more, but it's not necessary. On Android with the Pixel 7 Pro, the more RAM the better, since there's a lot more things happening in the background, and with the way Android operates and the thousands of different chipsets and phones that Android apps have to run on, it'll require more RAM for those apps to operate somewhat similarly on other phones. With the iPhone, there's only one chipset maker, and that's Apple. There's also only a select amount of devices with almost identical screen sizes, so it's a lot easier to, develop apps and have a more seamless experience from one device to another. I'm sure there's a better explanation about RAM management on Android somewhere on YouTube, and I'll try to link the best one down below in the description. But yeah, trying to compare apples to Android is a little unfair since it's running different operating systems, but using everyday apps like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or even playing games, I really couldn't tell that much of a difference between these two phones. However, I know for a fact that social media apps run smoother or feel a lot smoother on iOS, but that's not an iPhone 14 Pro Max thing, or is it a problem, from the 7 Pro? It's just something that I've noticed having used both iOS and Android in the last few years. And while Android's getting very close to iOS when it comes to, handling videos and photos on social media, it's just not on the same level yet. But everything else, you're not really going to notice a huge difference in how these two phones run apps on a daily basis. But yeah, besides that, both phones also have a triple camera setup, which we'll dive deeper into later in the video. Now, in terms of display size, both the 14 Pro Max and Pixel 7 Pro actually have the same size display at 6.7 inches. Both are also OLED, but the 14 Pro Max has the advantage here with a much brighter display with a peak brightness of 2000 nits, while the 7 Pro is capped at 1500 nits, which is still relatively bright, but that 2000 nits on the iPhone is just so much brighter for outdoor visibility. But besides that, the iPhone also features a newer LTPO technology, which can turn the phone's refresh rate down to 1 Hz, whereas the Pixel 7 Pro can only dip down to 10 Hz. Not a massive difference in my opinion, but theoretically the iPhone should be more efficient. And speaking of being efficient, the battery capacity on both of these phones are completely different as well. The Pixel 7 Pro packs a massive 5000 mAh battery, which can last me a full day with an average screen on time of 6.5 to 7 hours with 5G and LTE on T-Mobile. And then there's the iPhone 14 Pro Max with a 4323 mAh battery, which can also last a full day, sometimes a full day and then some change, with 15% in the morning with the new always on display turned off, which I actually just started to hate the more and more I used it, since the always on display on the iPhone is still too bright and gets even brighter if there's like a light source next to the phone where it'll trigger the auto brightness to turn up the display, which then makes the iPhone look like I left my screen on. In terms of design and build quality, I'm a little bit torn here. I love, the iPhone's flat sides and the flat display. I think it's a great design overall, but I also love the simplicity and the design on the Pixel 7 Pro as well. Plus, that camera bar just looks so good. I think it looks better than the iPhone's square camera bump on the back, but with the polished aluminum, especially on the white Pixel 7 Pro, you can see a ton of scratches, which you can most definitely hide if you use a skin or a case from channel sponsor Dbrand. Dbrand, if you didn't know, just released their new set called Digital Camo, which is available for almost all of their devices, including the Pixel 7 and the 7 Pro, as well as the iPhone 14 Pro Max. I have the glitch camo on the Pixel 7 Pro right now, and it just looks so trippy and looks so cool. Plus, with their skins, you can protect that polished aluminum or hide those scratches while making your device look unique. If you want to go ahead and pick up your own set of digital camos, go to dbrand.com/heymarkel or click the first link in the description below. Okay, so it's time for the camera comparison. This is probably what you guys have been waiting for in this video, but just like I said in my Pixel 7 Pro review, I really do think that the Pixel phones in general, especially the 7 series, takes the best photos on a smartphone, while iPhones, the 14 Pro Max in this case, takes the best videos on any smartphone. But yeah, jumping into the specs real quick, the Pixel 7 Pro features a 50 megapixel main wide camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera with autofocus for macro photography, and a 48 megapixel 5x periscope zoom lens. The 14 Pro Max, on the other hand, features a 48 megapixel main wide camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera that also supports macro photography and video, and the 12 megapixel 3x zoom lens. So what I love about these two phones this year is the fact that both Google and Apple are giving us a 2x zoom crop. Even though it's a digital crop, both phones are actually using the high megapixel sensor to digitally crop into a 12 megapixel shot and giving us a 2x zoom image without losing quality. Both phones actually do it a little bit differently in the back end, but the results are still pretty amazing. So how do the photos look? So from the photos that I've shot, the Pixel definitely looks more of a ready to upload, no edits type of photo, if that makes any sense. It just has the right amount of contrast, good saturation levels, and the final image just looks pleasing out of the camera. The iPhone looks a little bit more dull compared directly next to a Pixel phone, but what this opens up though is the ability to really edit and make your photos look more artistic. There's less contrast, it is a little less digitally sharp than the Pixel, but it still looks good. Now, for most people, they're probably not going to want to edit photos so often and just want something, that they can quickly share on Instagram or send to their friends. The Pixel takes really great photos no matter which lens you choose. Plus, having that 5x periscope zoom lens is pretty nice to have to get a bit of an extra reach, but I do find the final image to be a little bit softer than, compared to the main wide camera. Now, the 3x zoom on the iPhone, in my opinion, looks a little bit better in most scenarios, but yeah, when it comes to the main wide camera and the ultra wide, the Pixel, in my opinion, has the better final image out of the camera. It has that quote unquote Pixel look that we all know and love. In low light, here's another area where the Pixel just takes over. Having night sight and astrophotography mode, you can get some insane looking shots with the Pixel. Now, even though the iPhone's got really good night mode, it's just not as good as the Pixel camera. Plus, a dedicated astrophotography mode is pretty neat, and you can get some cool looking time lapse like this. Now, both phones can also shoot RAW photos, but only one phone can really take full advantage of the high megapixel count. On the iPhone 14 Pro Max, when you shoot in Apple Pro RAW, you can actually get a full 48 megapixel photo, which allows you to recrop and have a better composition with little to no image processing, perfect for post edits. On the Pixel, you're always going to get binned down to a 12 megapixel photo, even if you try to shoot RAW, so this is kind of disappointing on Google's end, but hopefully they can push out an update where users can take full advantage of that 50 megapixel shot from the main wide camera. Now, when it comes to video, I do really believe that the iPhones just do it better. Whether it's cinematic mode or just a regular 4K video, or even the action shot mode that they added on the 14 series this year, I just prefer the final video on the iPhone. I feel like the videos shot on Android phones, whether it's, the Pixel 7 Pro or another flagship, dips in frame rates every now and then and just looks a bit blocky, where some parts of the video look a little bit pixelated even though it's in 4K. The iPhone just looks so much more natural, and you can make really beautiful looking videos with this phone. Now, one thing they did add to the Pixel 7 Pro this year is cinematic blur, which looks really good. And here's a compilation of, the shots that I did with cinematic blur when I was at Camp Pixel in New York with a bunch of other creators. I think cinematic blur looks pleasing on the Pixel 7, but it is capped at 1080p at 24 frames per second, and you can't adjust the aperture or focus after the fact, which the iPhone 14 Pro Max can. It can shoot in 4K at either 24 frames or 30 frames per second, and can adjust the aperture and focus before and after shooting. So yeah, when it comes to video, iPhone is king, and when it comes to photos, I still think Pixel is king. But yeah, that's about it for these two phones. The Pixel 7 Pro starts at $899 for 128 gigs, while the 14 Pro Max starts at $1099 for 128 gigs. If you don't care about having blue or green bubbles, then hopefully this video helped you narrow down your decision on what phone you should get. Ultimately, both phones are really good, and whether you pick up the 14 Pro Max or the Pixel 7 Pro, you're still gonna enjoy it. If you shoot more photos, then maybe go for the Pixel 7 Pro, but if you like to film videos with your phone, then I highly recommend the iPhone 14 Pro Max.